Again, we're going to try this live video sample, so we'll see what happens. Today we're going to be in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, beginning with verse 14. Luke chapter 22, beginning with verse 14. When the hour came, he reclined at the table and the apostles with him. Then he said to them, I have fervently desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it again until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he said, Take this, and share it among yourselves, for I tell you, from now on, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, and said, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, he also took the cup after supper and said, This cup is the new covenant established by my blood. It is shed for you. But look, the hand of the one betraying me is at the table with me. For the Son of Man will go away as it has been determined. But woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. So they began to argue among themselves which of them it could be who was going to do this thing. Now, this passage has a lot packed in it, and we could spend a month of Sundays talking about just this passage alone. With the importance of what's going on here and the importance of the first Lord's Supper, and to understand the significance of this passage, there are only two things, two mandates that all of Christianity shares, and is between Catholics and Protestants, and then the run the gamut of Protestants alike as well, and that is two sacraments that we all share, and that's baptism and the Lord's Supper. And this passage is what we hear about the Lord's Supper. So we see how important it is. It's called the Lord's Supper or Eucharist or communion. And so we see how important and how central this is to the Christian faith. Now, what I want to look at here is something that's been weighing heavily on my mind late, and this is what we talked about when I presented this in our in-person Bible study a couple weeks ago. This verse 21, but look, the hand of the one betraying me is at the table with me. Now, we also know in the Gospel of John that along with this instituting of the Lord's Supper and this first feast, that Jesus washed his disciples' feet. Judas was there too. Judas, the one who was going to betray Jesus. Judas, the one who had already met with the scribes and Pharisees, and Jesus knew full well about it. Judas, the one who would sell him for 30 pieces of silver. Judas, the one who would betray him with a kiss. Judas, the one who would ultimately commit suicide over the overwhelming grief and hurt and stuff he was going through. Judas was there with him. And yet Jesus broke bread with him. Jesus washed his feet. Jesus shared this, I'm going to use the word communion, with Judas. Why didn't Jesus kick him out? Why didn't Jesus say, Judas, you're not invited? Judas, you are a traitor. And it said right here before that we had read it, I believe, last week. Or maybe we're going to read it next week. I get confused. That Satan had entered him. And yet he was still invited. He was still invited. Yes, then Satan entered Judas, who was numbered among the 12. And so Jesus still sat around the table with him, because that's a testament of who Jesus was. And I have to think about myself and sometimes of the anger that I have, and more so, not necessarily the anger, but sometimes the hurt that I've experienced from other people. And I think no matter what anyone's done to me, it's nothing compared to what Judas did to Jesus. And every once in a while, I'll get discouraged, because this happens. And then sometimes when you get discouraged, you begin to you start feeling a little depressed, and things start weighing on you. And then I start thinking about all those people who don't like me, and those people that when they see you avoid you or have said horrible things about you and horrible things to you, and it begins to weigh on you. And then after a while, that hurt turns to anger, and then you begin to think about, um, wouldn't it be nice if they got what they deserved, and how you'd just like to give them a piece of your mind. Yet Judas was at the table with Jesus. And that tells us who Jesus was. That tells us an awful lot about Christ. That's why Jesus said, in that same time, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. And I begin to think that if Jesus could sit at the table with Judas, couldn't I at least greet people in the store instead of walking the other way sometimes? Couldn't I at least rethink some of the things that I say about people? You know, sometimes we justify things and we say, well, and it's the truth. Well, does it really matter if it's the truth or not? There's a lot of truthful things that we could say that just because they're the truth does not make them okay to say. That does not make them any less hurtful or painful or just blatantly wrong. I had a doctor come in and he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, well, you know, you're morbidly obese. Well, I'd never been told that before, and I looked it up, and technically speaking, I am, or was. I've lost a little bit of weight, thankful, and I'm working on more. But um, so technically, that's the truth. Does that mean that every time I see someone in the store, I want them to come up and say, well, hello, Mr. Morbidly Obese? You know, Pastor Tim, he's the one that is over there. Yeah, he's the morbidly obese one. Well, it's the truth. Yeah, it's the truth, but doesn't necessarily need to be said. Or, well, hello, Mr. Been divorced 3 times. Or, hello, Mr. Living with someone. Or, hello, Mr. Liar. Or, hello, Mr. Tax Evader. You know, just because something's the truth doesn't mean we have to be reminded of it. I think about what's being, if you just look at Facebook right now, look at any social media and hear what's being said. Is that is that any way that Christ would have us talk about people? Um, we turn over here in Corinthians, and this is important for us to be reminded too. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And you know that's talking about love. And I read that a lot at weddings, and it has really nothing to do with well, it is, but it's more about how Christians should relate to one another instead of married couple. But it says, if I speak human or angelic languages but do not have love, I'm a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I donate all my goods to feed the poor, and if I give my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. He goes on. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful. It is not conceited. Love does not act improperly. It is not selfish. It is not provoked. It does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Later on it says, for now we see indistinctly as in a mirror, but then face to face. Now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. I was in band in high school. And it seemed like at least once a week this would happen because I was in percussion, played the bass drum. Thank you very much. And uh, someone would drop the cymbals. You ever heard someone drop the cymbals when you're on risers in an acoustic room? It's bad. It sounds horrible, and it rings in your ears, and it just seems to go on forever. If I speak in human or angelic languages, but do not have love, I am a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. The words that you speak, do they sound like words of love or more like a clanging cymbal? I hear a lot of clanging cymbals on Facebook these days. And the hate that spews forth and the anger and the animosity. If Jesus can sit at a table and break bread and drink of the cup and wash the feet of Judas, could we not at least simply refrain from saying horrible hate and mean filled things about people? I mean, yeah, we need to love them and care for them and serve them, but goodness, folks, how about just one step at a time? Maybe we shouldn't start thinking we're going to wash our persecute us. How about take baby steps and just make a resolution that, at least for right now, we're going to stop posting and saying and repeating hate filled speech, even if it's the truth.